What is up, everyone? It's Friday night. Welcome into episode number 1 of the Fantasy Cheat Sheet. This is a brand new podcast for the Going for Two Live podcast network. And you can find us on Twitter at Going for Two Live, or check us out on the YouTube page for Going for Two Live as well. I am your host, Jay Christensen, and I'm joined by my two co-hosts. First, we got Mike Hicks. How you doing tonight, Mike?
Pretty good, Jay. Ready to kick off the football season.
Yeah, and we also got Evan Ritter. What's going on, Evan?
How's it going, fellas? Couldn't be more happy to be here with you guys and kick off a new podcast. Couldn't ask for a better way to kick off the fantasy season and the NFL season. Let's go ahead and get into it.
Yeah, we are super excited to bring this new show to you. So more about us in a second, but let me give you a quick description of what the Fantasy Cheat Sheet podcast is. So we're going to be coming at you every single Friday night during the fantasy season this year. And basic premise here is we're going to give you 10 things that you need to know heading into Sunday's games. So we might be giving you a key stat. We might giving you a guy to start, a guy to sit, maybe how we think a game's going to play out or go. Basically anything that we think can help you win your fantasy matchups this weekend or give you a little bit more insight into these games. That's what we're going to be trying to give you on this show. And like I said, every Friday night, 8:30 Eastern time on the Going for Two Live network. That's where you can check us out all fantasy season long. So pretty basic show. Now that you know a little bit about that, let's give you a little bit more about us, your three co-hosts here. I'll kick things off. Like I said at the top, my name is Jay Christensen. You can find me on Twitter at JAYC_DFF. I'm a writer for goingfor2.com. I write some Dynasty articles there, little redraft articles. I also do some podcasting myself with my two brothers. We do a podcast called Brothers of Dynasty podcast that you can find us at Bros of Dynasty on Twitter for that. And that podcast is actually on the Fantasy Collective network of podcasts, and you can find them at FF_collective. That's collective with a K. Lots of good stuff there. So after you watch us here, go hit up goingfor2.com, go hit up the Fantasy Collective, Brothers of Dynasty, all that stuff. Lots of good stuff going on. So that's a little bit about me. Let me kick it over to you, Mike, to tell us where we can find you and what you've been working on.
All right, so you can find me on Twitter at DropTheMikeFF. I'm the lead Dynasty writer and a ranker over at Going for Two. I haven't been writing as much because I've been doing some of the back work, but I'll be doing some more stuff during the season and more stuff to come.
Awesome. Like, let's say I hear about you, Evan. Where can we find you?
So, at Twitter at ev_rit3, EV_RITT3. And all my stuff is at goingfor2.com. I do redraft, DFS, betting, starting to get into Dynasty. Not my strong suit yet, but love it. I'm going to have to get in with Mike and you and, get some tips. But yeah, I mean, I got into my first league this year and love it, dude. So definitely going to just dive straight into Dynasty for sure.
It's addicting.
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, so I'm going to be doing a lot of DFS, a lot of redraft during the season and some betting articles. Obviously, we'll be here every Friday night. But yeah, pretty much everything will be on goingfor2.com.
That's awesome. Yeah, the best thing about Dynasty is like next year you want to draft, you just do another league, and then all of a sudden you're in like 15 leagues. So that's kind of what our Dynasty goes. That's where you can find us. So let's get into things. What we're gonna do each week, we have football. Football is back. We had an awesome game last night. So Thursday football is obviously going to come before our show each week. So we're gonna hit on the Thursday night game each week and give some takeaways from that game. Obviously, last night we had the defending champion Tampa Bay Buccaneers going up against the Dallas Cowboys, and it was just a fantastic game. I was pumped for football anyways. Last night's game did not disappoint. It was 31-29. The Cowboys hung with the champs, had a chance to win at the end, but then left Tom Brady just a little bit too much time on the clock, marched him down the field and hit the game-winning field goal at the end there. We're not going to go crazy into this game because we got more to get into, but let's kind of go round robin style here and give a little bit of a takeaway that we have from the game. And as our resident Cowboys fan here, Evan, I'm going to kick it to you first, but keep it brief, I guess, because I know you could probably talk about this game for hours and hours. But
oh man, I could go on forever. First and foremost, this is a fantasy show, so keep an eye on the Michael Gallup injury. Definitely looks like he's going to miss time, so that means an uptick in targets for Lamb and Cooper, obviously. Now, like you said earlier, Jay, not if they can get any more, but yeah. So talking a little bit about the game, I love the game plan. I was really encouraged by the game plan that McCarthy and Kellen Moore, drew up. They went pass heavy, which I think was really smart because we all know the defensive front of the Bucs is, not only massive, but the best in the game. They're just so good. So keeping it away from them, I think was, really smart. And we were eating their secondary up. So I also think any questions about how Dak was going to respond to being injured, his ankle injury last year, and then having the current injury of his shoulder, I think those questions were answered. So yeah, it looked great. What got to me the most is if we just clean up some of the penalties and we make those field goals and the extra point early on, we're walking away with a W. End of the day, we left too much time on the clock for Tom Brady, and Tom Brady did what Tom Brady does and got the W. But overall, I was super encouraged by what I saw. Last thing I'll end with is buy the dip on Zeke. There was just a product of the game plan last night, which was smart by the Cowboys. But like you'll see Mike talk about, Mike sheds light on the Cowboys will not see a playoff team until week 11 when they go against Mike's Chiefs. They're going to get some good matchups. Zeke's going to get some good matchups. He's going to eat and put some feelers out there. If you have any owners of Zeke in your leagues that are skittish, like I said, go ahead and buy the dip because they are going to feed Zeke in these next coming games, and he will eat.
Nice. That kind of leads it to you, Mike. What do you got from this game?
All right. So the biggest thing to me is just like Evan said, I want to say one thing about the Cowboys game plan, or not game plan, but a part of the game plan. There is no way that they should have tried to kick that 60-yard field goal. I know it didn't come and bite him. I know it didn't come and bite him in the rear end, but you had a 31-yard missed field goal. You had a missed extra point. You do that with 2 or 3 seconds left. You never know what Tom Brady can do. We just saw it with 1 minute and 20 seconds left. You don't do that, Mike McCarthy. You saw Green Bay do that last year in the playoff game, and then they ended up throwing a bomb to Scotty Miller at halftime, and that's part of the reason they lost. But the main thing I want to bring up is exactly what Evan was saying, and that's the schedule coming up. Dallas proved that they can play with Tampa Bay, which scares me now because I thought Dallas was maybe not back yet. I thought, not knowing what was going to happen with Dak, if he was healthy or not. They proved that this team is for real. If they can put some stuff in their defense, get their defense going, this team's for real because they don't play another playoff team to the Chiefs in week 11. And here's their schedule coming up. They got, you got Tampa Bay that they just played. Then after that, they got the Eagles, Carolina, the Giants, the Broncos. Those are teams that Zeke and the rest of the team should be able to eat up. They could easily be a 3 or 4 loss team when they go into week 11. And if you would have asked me if that was the case before the last night's game, I would have told you were absolutely crazy. So I agree with Evan on buy the dip. And I love the wide receiver group. So that leads right into you, Jay.
Yeah, and they just basically, both teams were like, no running tonight. We're just throwing 108 combined passes between the two teams. Just wild, which is great for fantasy, especially if you have any of the receivers from either of these teams. Interesting notes on some of the target share that I found interesting was, obviously Antonio Brown had some big plays there, but really Godwin dominated the target share there on the Tampa Bay side. 14 targets over Brown, 7. Gronk was the next highest with 8. Mike Evans, the encouraging thing, that was not a great game for him. He just wasn't as involved in the big plays as the other guys there, but he was on the field more than Antonio Brown. He was on the field for, I think, 96, like basically Godwin's share of being on for snaps, while Antonio Brown was about 65% of the snaps. So I think he's going to be a boomer bust guy, kind of what he's kind of turned into later in his career here. He's going to have good weeks and he's going to have bad weeks. It's just whether they can connect on the big plays with Evans. I've never been a huge Evans guy anyways, but if you have him on any of your teams, I wouldn't worry too much. I think he'll have better games going forward. On the other side of the ball, we know about Cooper and CeeDee Lamb, just massive target share there. Interesting thing with the Gallup injury, is there a room for a third guy there? Cedric Wilson had some targets. That guy's going to be on the field a little bit more with Gallup out. And then also the tight ends. Dalton Schultz was very, very involved. I think he was out there for 65% of the snaps. That's really good. And he had 6 targets, and Jarwin had 4. So that's 10 to the tight end. So especially if one of those guys got hurt, that would be very interesting, especially with Gallup out of the lineup, if they're going to throw to the tight end. And Dalton Schultz was pretty good last year. So that could be some fantasy guys to look out for, especially on waiver wire pickups coming up.
Yeah, and a $5,600 Antonio Brown last night for DraftKings was a must-have, but going forward, we won't see that price tag.
No, I'm sure. I'm sure he'll be close to Evans. They'll be around the same. Yeah. Maybe he'll even tick up over him. I don't know. Yeah. They certainly clicked, and man, yeah, Godwin though, he was also just fantastic. Just all the volume going his way. And he didn't get benched after he fumbled like Rojo, which was good.
Everyone had a great night unless you were Rojo.
Speaking of DFS, I finished 5 spots out of the money, and I had Rojo as my captain.
Oh man!
Oh, wow, that's impressive to have. Did he get negative in that? Did that DFS there? Yeah,
that hurts.
That's unreal. That's a good place to stop on that game. Let's get into the main meat of our show, the cheats of the week. We have our list of 10 things that you need to know going into this weekend's games. We're basically going to go around round robin style on this, and we're going to kick things off with the first cheat of the week, and the inaugural one. We'll go to you, Evan, on this one. Kick us off with your first cheat of the week.
Yeah, so it's going to be Lamar Jackson for me, man. I think with the injuries seemingly to every running back on that roster, Lamar Jackson will be the Ravens' entire offense pretty much. And I think he's going to be asked to take on even more of a rushing workload, which we all love for fantasy purposes. I think he's easily going to have over another 1,000 yards plus rushing this season. I also believe he's going to take a step forward in the passing game. Even though we may not see Harbaugh, open up the passing game until a little later in the year when all of Lamar's pass catchers are back to full strength. But still, I think Lamar's in for not only a big week 1, but a huge year. So either way, I mean, things are just lining up for Lamar to get back to his 2019 form or better. And I think he's going to be the ultimate cheap code this fantasy season.
Yeah, that's great stuff. I don't remember a team quite going through the injuries that teams had at one position early. You kind of see it as the season goes on sometimes, where you're getting to your 3rd, 4th string. But man, and they've had to bring in Latavius Murray, Devontae Freeman, Lev Bell. It goes on and on. So yeah, they wanted to pass more. I think they're going to have to this season. What do you think about the passing situation there in Baltimore, Mike?
I think, just like Evan said, I just want to bring up the fact that talk about bad luck. When you have Marcus Peters and Gus Edwards go down on back-to-back plays on the last practice, not even in pads, but just the last practice before you break camp and go for the season. But Lamar, this passing game was going to have to improve before all the injuries. We've all said it. Everyone's been saying it all offseason. All of us experts, analysts, everyone's been saying that people have to step up. That's why they wouldn't have thought that they went and drafted Rashad Bateman. They went and drafted Tylan Wallace. You just paid Mark Andrews the bank. You're hoping that Hollywood Brown steps up and becomes a guy you think. Now, if those guys don't step up, this team is not going to be the team that we think. And if Lamar doesn't do what Evan's saying, the Browns are going to win the division.
I could definitely see. I kind of like the Browns coming in, I think, anyways. They were close with Baltimore. Now it's kind of like, yeah, I mean,
that's
it's just,
yeah.
Sometimes teams just get this. They get snake bitten. It's just injuries and just.
Yeah, it's like, what can you do, you know?
It's just like bad juju on the team, and it just doesn't go their way. And yeah, it's gonna have to all ride on Lamar.
Yeah,
and defenses are really gonna probably be able to key in on that. It'll just be interesting if he can pass enough to, kind of overcome the shortcomings that they're gonna have from the running back position. All good stuff there. That'll be one to watch for sure, and just to see which back comes out of that. I mean, out of the stable of backs that they now have, that'll be very interesting. Mike,
I'm hoping it's Latavius Murray.
Oh yeah, probably.
By the end of the year, I don't know about Williams yet, but by the end of the year, it will be more Latavius Murray than Le'Veon Bell.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just bad losses on the team. We got a comment in the chat. Peter's loss is really bad. This is my brother in the chat, Josh Christensen. I'm not worried about the offense really, but Peter's made such a difference. Yeah, it's not even just the offensive losses for the Ravens. It's the defensive losses too. It's just everything. And then sometimes, like I said, it's kind of just the team just doesn't have it one year. You saw it with San Francisco last year. They go to the Super Bowl, they lose, they come back the next year, they have just a litany of injuries. Jimmy G goes down and they don't make the playoffs, and they're just not a good team. I'm not saying that's where Baltimore is going because they still got Lamar, but certainly not headed the right direction. Mike, let's kick it to you for our second cheat of the week.
All right.
Take it away.
So we all know this offseason, Mr. Aaron Diva himself, Rodgers, didn't know if he was going to play in Green Bay, Denver, Jeopardy, or just go on sit on the coast of Hawaii with his girlfriend. But he decided to come back to Green Bay. But now the hurricane down in New Orleans made New Orleans move the game to Jacksonville. But there's been reports now that they did this on purpose. They were told by the NFL that the only restrictions that the NFL gave them was they wanted to keep them on the East Coast because of time slot. The reason I bring this up, there's reports that they did it on purpose because he is 3-4 in the state of Florida with a 78.1 passer rating, and it was actually confirmed by the GM that they looked into this. The other reason they did it was because they did not want to go further up north and have the Green Bay Packer fans show up in droves to the game. So they kept it in Florida for that. But my thing is this. A mad and motivated Aaron Rodgers is an Aaron Rodgers I will not bet against. Put him in your lineups. Put him in your DFS. Pick the Packers. They're going to win this game. Boom.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I love it. I love it.
Actually, I mean, I really like that gamesmanship of them. Just like, where did he play the worst in his career? Like, find me the worst state in the South, preferably where he played bad. And so that's fantastic. I hope all of that's true and none of that's fabricated at all, because that's fantastic. But I like, because I mean, it would motivate someone like Rodgers, though. You think of the chip he had on his shoulder pretty much his entire career. When he got drafted at the back of the first round, he had how many different draft quarterbacks taken over him? What was it? Alex Smith was number one that year. Yep. So that motivated him to crush at the beginning of his career. The Brett Favre kind of slight or whatever happened there motivated him. So it's a guy that does seem maybe like he needs to draw on things to get him going. And yeah, I like it. I could see him for sure going off there. I mean, New Orleans defense, the New Orleans kind of things are shaking up anyways, so we'll see where that goes. They were a really good run defense last year. They're probably exploitable through the pass, so I could definitely see Rodgers having a good game there. Any thoughts on that one, Evan?
before Evan goes, don't forget he got his boy Randall Cobb back too.
Oh, that's true.
And who he wanted, who he advocated for. So he definitely is probably going to target the Cobb. I mean, not much to add. I mean, that's just a great take. I love that take that that Mike just had on that game. And I mean, it couldn't be more true. A motivated and, an angry Rodgers with a chip on his shoulder is one that you probably don't want to bet against. And I think he for sure goes in and is 1-0 after week 1.
Yeah, I like that a lot. It'll be an interesting game to watch there for sure. Especially on the other side of the ball there, going against New Orleans and Jameis, his return to the starting lineup. So that'll be an interesting game to watch for sure. I'm going to go with my first one of my cheats of the week. This is number 3 on our list of our 10 cheats of the week here. I'm looking at the rookies, in particular the rookie wide receivers. What I took a look at is just over time, I had in my head that the starting a rookie on their first debut, their first game, how does that gone in history for some of the wide receivers that we've seen over the past few years? So I kind of combed back through the last 5 years of receivers and came up with the names of guys like Henry Ruggs, Judy, and Lamb last year, back to N'Keal Harry a couple of years ago. I even included A.J. Brown and DK Metcalf that year that were second-round picks. I tried to stay with top picks and also second rounders, a couple of them. And Corey Davis, Calvin Ridley, DJ Moore. So these are the types of names I was looking at. On average, in their debut, these guys combined only averaged around 7 to 8 fantasy points. I think it clocked in at about 7.3 in their debut game. So the main point is just to tread carefully, particularly with rookie wide receivers. I mean, sometimes it's just your roster construction of your team, and you're just going to have to roll with one of the rookies and chase the upside. But it, particularly for the wide receivers, it just takes a little while to get going. Think of Justin Jefferson last year, who only had scored 4 fantasy points in his debut game. It took him a few games to get going. If I'm looking back through history, the biggest performer was back in 2016 with Will Fuller, of all people. Will Fuller posted a 21-point fantasy performance in his first game.
Mr. Boomer Bust himself.
Mr. Boomer, he boomed to start, and then, it probably got hurt a couple of games later, probably. But, that's kind of how it goes with these guys, and especially some of the great ones. Like I said, Jefferson, even Ridley and Moore that year, they basically posted essentially zeros their first game. Just were used sparingly. I'm thinking of a guy like Jamar Chase with his struggles in preseason. Does he see the field enough? Is he mixed in with other guys? I would be wary of starting a guy like that. And I'm trying to think of like which receivers I would trust this week. The two that come to mind, I just think Devontae Smith has to be involved. So I probably could come around to starting him depending on what choices I had on my team, just because I don't know who else they could throw it to there. And he's just kind of seems like the most pro-ready receiver, stayed in college longer, Heisman winner. I think he should get plenty of volume there. And then Elijah Moore would be the sneakier one just because of the Jamison Crowder supposed to be missing this week's game. So if he gets enough time out there, but I feel like you just never know when these guys are just not going to be out on the field quite as much as you think they are if they haven't kind of learned everything that they need to learn yet. Ultimately, if I had to bet on one outside of those two, it'd be Kyle Pitts, because he'd be the best receiver, because he's not a tight end, he's a receiver. So he's going to have a good game.
Come on, Jay.
So bank on Kyle Pitts this weekend. But what do you guys think about that? Do you trust any rookies this weekend? Do you have a guy you would start in your lineup, or are you kind of trying to stay away as best as you can? I'll start with you, Evan.
Personally, I'm trying to take the wait and see approach. If I have the luxury, I know on the DFS side of things, I have looking over things and listening to some other people's takes. The Hurts to Devontae Smith is kind of a stack that people are targeting because of obviously the Falcons' secondary or lack thereof. But I just, like I said, I think for at least, week 1, week 2, I'm going to try to take the wait and see approach. I have a couple leagues where I think I'm going to have to start Waddle. So I'm going to kind of forced into hoping that, he does well. But if I do have the luxury, I'm going to try to take the wait and see approach because, it takes a while we even saw it with Justin Jefferson last year. It takes a little bit for these rookie receivers, even if they are going to take a leap. It takes them, some time to get acclimated to the speed of the game and the routes and the play calling and the physicality of NFL cornerbacks and so forth. So at least for week 1, maybe even week 2, I'm going to try my best to take the wait and see approach on these rookie receivers.
All right. So I have to also press a little bit of action with Jalen Waddle. I am a little worried about that, but you got to do what you got to do. But going into the offseason, being the Dynasty writer for Going for Two, I was doing some of the rookie profiles. Waddle was my number 2 rookie of this class after Devontae. So I am not that worried about Waddle. It's just a fact that he's going against New England, and you never know about that. I wouldn't press anyone into action, but I do want to say I agree with Jay 100% on one player, and that is hold off on Jamar Chase. I think early in the season, it's not the time to play him. They still have Boyd. They still have Higgins. They're both good. Let Chase get his feet wet and then put him in once you see what he can do.
Plus, we want to see, how Burrow kind of bounces back from this injury. So far, he's reports are, and watching him in preseason, he seems to be kind of timid. So we need to see if he's, if and when he's ready to kind of get back to form.
Yeah, no, it's definitely one to definitely watch out for there. Just how Burrow comes back. Can Chase get over his preseason stuff? I think he ultimately will. It just might take a couple games, and it's just not without precedence. It's just like we love Justin Jefferson now. It didn't start right away. And I don't know if you were necessarily starting him right away in your lineups last year. I don't remember being like, I got to get him in. We were talking about Ole BC Johnson in the preseason, and that obviously was kind of, not true, and it ended up being Jefferson's show. It just took a couple of games, so you just got to be patient.
I do want to say one thing. I did misspeak. Your brother caught it. I did say Waddle over Chase, but I meant to say I had Chase as my number 1. I have Waddle over Devontae Smith.
Well, he's not going to like that either. Because somehow every show I'm on, Devontae Smith and my brother seems to come up. But and I have the same worries just with the Patriots D. I like the Patriots D, so you're going to need Waddle to do something big. He needs to break one play. That's probably where his what you're rolling with there if you're playing him. But sometimes your team dictates what you're going to have to do with your lineup. So
exactly.
And you just have to kind of roll with it and play the guys you get. All right, so rookies it's an exciting class anyway, so it'll be interesting to watch how they do and how they progress during the season. So definitely keep an eye out for that. That's enough for that one. Let's move on to number 4, and this is back to you, Evan. Give us your next one.
All right, so speaking of rookie receivers, I'm going to talk about now a second-year receiver in Brandon Ayuk. He has the best matchup of week 1. And this is according to PFS wide receiver / cornerback matchup. They have a chart that you can go on there. If you're a subscriber, they have a wide receiver cornerback matchup chart, which I love kind of, gazing over, looking at that and picking that apart, especially for, when I'm making lineup decisions. Yeah. So on that chart, it has the Lions as the number 1 best matchup for the 49ers receivers. And that's just, most of it is just the lack of experience at the position for the Lions. They have 5 cornerbacks on their roster. Only 3 of them are playing in their first NFL game. Also, looking over Ayuk's games last year, he's made at least 1 explosive play in the last 7 games. So, I don't think he's going to have any issues having a big game against, the Lions secondary, or lack thereof for that matter. So this Sunday, big game coming for Ayuk going against that weak secondary of the Lions. And Deebo Samuel is in the same boat. Rohie Mostert, I love this week. I'm going to be targeting a lot of Niners come Sunday. Not only in my season long, but once again in DFS matchups. I have a lot of Mostert in my DFS lineups this coming up week.
Yeah, I can't argue with that. There's no way I can go to bat for the Detroit Lions defense. That's for sure. I just visions of last season. and you're starting any player you can essentially versus that defense. Last year, I think you got to kind of come into this season thinking the same thing in terms of this matchup here with the 49ers and their pass catchers and anything else you can throw at them. I just have visions of, what was it, that Tampa game last year? I know they had, I think, a COVID outbreak at that point, but it was like the most joke defense I think I had ever seen. It was just scoring at will. They pulled Brady at halftime. It was barely an NFL game last year. So that's what I think of when I think of the Lions. So it's just play all your players. Obviously things can change though. Like sometimes at the beginning of the year is the hardest time you have to kind of go with the information you have, but week one's always tricky sometimes. I'm not saying it's going to be this game, but it's always some curveball happens where that defense you thought that was going to be good isn't good, or the one that you thought, vice versa. So something will probably happen. We'll be talking about it next week, where I didn't think that team was going to play like that. That's kind of how it goes, but you got to go with the information you have week one. And the Lions were a bad defense. There's still a lot of inexperience there, like you said. So Ayuk, Debo, and honestly, Jimmy G's interesting in deeper leagues. From if you super flex, if you need a quarterback and you're debating guys kind of at the back half there, you're sitting with Mac Jones and Jimmy G or something like that. Mac Jones, debut game. I roll with Jimmy G versus the Detroit defense. It's terrible. I was talking about. So
this is not the game that Trey Lance is hoping for to make Jimmy G look bad for sure. So,
right. What do you think about that, Mike? Any thoughts on this game here? Do you think Trey Lance plays at all? You think he's
not going to play.
No,
I still think. I mean, I don't have much to add to this because it's the Lions, and this isn't going to be the time for Dan Campbell to start biting kneecaps quite yet. That might happen in 3 or 4 games, but that's not happening against this team. That's pretty much it. Jay, why don't you go with your next take, and then I'll go after you because I know that your next one plays into this game.
Yeah, mine was another thing on the 49ers. I just thought, like, if you just want to keep piling it on the Lions, that rush defense isn't quite better. You kind of hinted at it, Evan, but my number 5 here for our cheats of the week here is really Rohie Mostert is essentially a must start, and you're probably looking to get him into DFS lineups or anything like that. Just get your 49ers in anyways, but the Lions defense last year gave up, first of all, they were one of the worst rushing defenses in the league. They basically on average gave up 27.5 fantasy points per game against opposing running backs. And interesting enough, they gave up 10 receiving touchdowns, and the next closest team gave up 5. So even from the receiving perspective for running backs, they're catching touchdowns, and that kind of is a little bit more up Mostert's alley there. That's the guy you might expect to get a short pass in the open field and be able to score with it. So I just think from any way you look at it, from the receiving perspective for a running back or rushing it, Mostert's should have a lot of opportunities in this game for fantasy points. So I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be starting him in your lineup this week of all games. The other thing that we could look at is you maybe sneak in Trey Sermon. We were just talking about rookie wide receivers. I'm not quite as concerned with rookie running backs if I think they're going to play. He's farther down if I was looking at running backs to play this week, but in a game where the 49ers could get up big, start playing more of their backup players or not, Mostert, it's going to probably be Sermon. They drafted him pretty high in the draft. I would think that they want to get him on the field, especially against a team that he could feast against, to get him going. That's a guy that you want to get going. He seems to be a guy who gets on a roll when good things start to happen and just, gets yards, gets touchdowns and things like that. So I could see him being kind of a sneakier start farther down your running back ranks this week, but a guy that could definitely score versus the Lions. Guys, have any thoughts on the rushing situation there in that game?
Go, Evan.
Just my only take would be, obviously, like we've just been pounding the Lions. We all are in agreement that the Niners, in all phases of the game, are going to take this game handedly. But on the DFS side of things, Raheem Mostert is most likely going to be a really high-owned player. So maybe pivoting to someone like Trey Lance would be a good pivot off a high-owned Mostert. and a good way to get a leverage in a GPP. Because that's what you need when you're going into a big field tournament in DFS. Is you need those good pivots off the high owned plays that not only good pivots, but obviously you want to pivot to someone who has a chance of paying off their salary and then some. So the rushing attack should do great going up against the Lions, and maybe that may be something to look at if we go into Sunday and Rohie Mostert's ownership is through the roof, like I think it's going to be. Take a hard look at maybe pivoting to a lower owned and a less expensive Trey Sermon.
For sure. I like that. We actually did get a question in the chat. It's actually a trade question. Getting away from that'll kind of wrap up that 49ers game. Love every 49er. Basically, it could be all 10 cheats. Just play every 49er this week if you can. You're probably going to turn out okay. Unless Detroit's defense wakes up, and then we'll all be wrong. But I'm going to throw it up on the screen here. It kind of relates to our Baltimore takes earlier where we were talking about the depths of running backs that they've had to dive into. But the guy that seems to be the lead back there is Tyson Williams, who basically an undrafted guy. And the trade question here is, should I trade away Tyson Williams plus Sermon for Myles Gaskin in half PPR? So you've got the Williams who's kind of come out of nowhere, plus Sermon for the established kind of guy from last year who's really solid, and especially in PPR, Myles Gaskin. Mike, why don't you take the lead on this one and give me your thoughts on this trade? Would you do that? Williams plus Sermon for Gaskin?
So the big question to me is you have to determine on your squad where you are right now. If you're in going for the title or in win mode right now, I'm making this deal right now. But if you're not quite there or you're in rebuild, do not get rid of Trey Sermon because he is the future of the team. After this season, there is only 2 49er running backs that are on the squad right now under contract. Those are Elijah Mitchell and Trey Sermon. That's it. So if you're not going for the win this year, do not make this deal. But I love Myles Gaskin more than others, so I'm a little biased on it. But if I'm not winning this year, I'm not making this deal. And
yeah,
that is assuming that this is Kyle just asked if this is Dynasty or Redraft. I'm assuming this is Dynasty. So
yeah, and Redraft, it sounds like, would you do it in Redraft? Like that's win now always. So
yeah, that's win now always.
Like
yeah,
you would probably do that in Redraft, right?
Yeah, in Redraft, I'm doing it.
Yeah,
I was gonna say.
I think I agree there. You don't know. I don't know what you have in Tyson Williams. He could be backing up Murray next week. Like, who knows? And Sermon could take a while to develop. That's a guy that wasn't overly prolific in college. He had those couple big games at the end, but Gaskin's more of the sure thing. I'd like it even better in full PPR, but I still like the half PPR with Gaskin because I think that's where he kind of eats his, the receptions. But yeah, I'm with you. I would do that if I was trying to win the ship this year.
Yep.
So let's kick it to you, Mike. Back to you for number 6 on our list here. Give us the 6 cheat of the week.
All right, so one of my disdains in fantasy and football for the past few years, even though it's not my team, has been Adam Gase and how horrible he was for the New York Jets and for Sam Darnold's career overall. We saw it with Ryan Tannehill. We saw it with Kenyon Drake. We've seen it with other people. He's ruined people's careers. He should only be watching football where we are, and that is on our couch. He should not be coaching ever again. And the reason I bring this up is Sam Darnold with the Carolina Panthers on Sunday is going to have a great game. He's going to want to prove the Jets that he is the player that they drafted, not the player that he was the last couple of years. He's not going to see Ghost on the sideline. I think he's going to finish up right around number 20 QB. For me, if I had to start him as my number 2 in Superflex, I would be more than comfortable doing it.
I like that. Darnold is facing the Jets now, who were third worst team versus the pass last season. So they're not good. Gave up on average 22 fantasy points per game. So it's certainly a good matchup. I would say, to your point, if there was ever a time for a guy to wait, like, can he just get like the Aaron Rodgers chip on his shoulder? You just want some fire from the kid. Like, this would be the time. And you got to think that the team wants him to do well, obviously, anyways, but they brought him in to be their quarterback, one there. So
And
I
they brought back,
they want to get him
and
going.
he's back with
have a good
Robbie
game.
Anderson. He's back with Robbie Anderson. They got DJ Moore. They Terrace Marshall, McCaffrey. That's going to be his best friend is McCaffrey in the dump off. He's got better weapons. And like you said, Jay, the fieriness of him, if he's not fired up for this game, he shouldn't be an NFL quarterback.
Yeah, this is a good litmus test of like what you have going for it. Like this has to be the game. I'm probably not as bullish on him, but I think certainly in Superflex, I like him as a QB2 for sure. But I do like him in this game because of the matchup, and he has to do it this week, or I would be concerned. What about you, Evan? Are you high on Darnold this week, or are you a little bit more concerned?
So I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say I'm high on Darnold, but am I going to take some shots on Darnold? Why not? Especially with the revenge narrative. And after I just heard Mike say that, I pulled up one of my DFS lineups that I have, I was playing with and I put together. One of my low end stacks, I think, is going to be the Darnold to Robinson this Sunday. Not only does that allow you to fit in a McCaffrey and a Kelsey if you wanted to. I have Kelsey and McCaffrey in this lineup, but I have Sam Darnold, Christian McCaffrey, Raheem Mostert, Robbie Anderson, Travis Kelsey, all in a DFS lineup. So that stack allows you to get some high-end plays in it. And I think that, one of the, like Mike was saying, that while Adam Gase, was terrible for the Jets and Sam Darnold and that entire organization, one of the bright spots was the Sam Darnold to Robbie Anderson connection. And I think that, that's going to continue this year. So I'm hoping that, especially for my pockets purposes, that that continues this week. And Darnold can, show us that everything in New York wasn't who he really was, that he had that high draft capital for a reason.
Yeah, this is a solid week for that Staxy, the Darnold to Anderson, the rare double revenge game.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, right.
So they're both going against their former teams. So I like that. That'll be one of my favorite games on the slate is that one, because I remember when the schedule came out, it was like, okay, they're playing week 1. All right, Darnold versus the Jets. I like it. There are a lot of interesting matchups this week, and that is certainly one of them. So yeah, Darnold certainly trot him out there. Superflex for sure. QB2. We'll see what the kid can do this week. Evan, number 7. What's our 7th topic this week?
So for me, I'm going back to James Robinson. I think he's going to pick up right where he left off last year and be a top 12 option in week 1. He's going against the Houston Texans, who arguably could be the best matchup, all year long, who fantasy managers are going to be targeting all season long and DFS and season long. So yeah, I just think he has one of, if not the easiest matchups in week 1. He's going to have plenty of scoring opportunities going up against that Houston defense. So yeah, in week 1, if you have James Robinson, start him if you got him.
What do you think on that, Mike? What are your thoughts on James Robinson this week in that matchup?
I'm just going to keep it simple. If he doesn't do it against Houston, he's not going to do it very often. And Houston is the dumpster fire of the league this year. One thing I will say about Houston is just play all your studs against Houston, play all your mid-tier guys against Houston, and you're probably going to get stud numbers 60-70% of the time. So you have to play Robinson. There is no one really behind him. Who? Carlos Hyde? Come on, really? Is this 2016?
Yeah, I'm not buying into that.
No, this is James. I don't think he's going to get as much load as he did last year, partly because of the system that Urban Meyer runs. I will add, that's my issue, is I don't trust Urban Meyer, but in this game, I think that's not going to be an issue quite yet because it is Houston.
Yeah, Houston's second worst. So we're versus the run last year. We're talking about Detroit before. Houston, pretty close. Almost the same thing, just in terms of defenses last year and just giving up a ton of points. I was going to say the same thing. It's like, yeah, the Carlos Hyde doesn't worry me. But Urban Meyer playing Carlos Hyde worries me because it doesn't really matter sometimes the talent or just what guys have left. If a coach trusts a guy and just wants to trot him out there. Kind of saw it last night with Fournette. I didn't think Fournette looked particularly good last night, but this has the trust enough of Arians to basically play. He's getting catching passes out there, which he doesn't even do well. I have visions of just seeing Carlos Hyde out there more than he should, but it doesn't take away from like Robinson. He is a great play this week.
My hope is
super solid start.
My hope is that Robinson can take advantage of this, lackluster defense, and Urban Meyer will be like, okay, yeah, I got to leave him in the game. I got to give this guy opportunity, and not feed Hyde as much as we saw in the preseason. I'm just hoping the man Spartans up because Robinson should be able to take full advantage of this Houston defense. Now, to your guys' point going forward, in different matchups, maybe reconsider because, Urban Meyer has shown that he hasn't really shown the ability to adjust to the NFL. He's kind of trying to bring that college atmosphere a little too much into the NFL. But I still think week 1, James Robinson is a great play.
Yep, definitely got to get in the lineups this week. Let's kick it back to you, Mike. We are up to number 8.
All right, so this is all about Mr. Justin Herbert. Yes, as a Chiefs fan, I love Mr. Justin Herbert. In my dynasty rankings, I have him at number 5. Yes, I have him above Lamar Jackson in dynasty rankings, Evan. In redraft, I have him right around there, but not this week. This week, I think he's going to finish maybe 12. 11, 12 is where I think he's going to end up. Don't be surprised if he finishes out of QB1 in 12-man leagues. Washington football team's defense is the reason. This has nothing to do with the Chargers. This all has to do with the front 7 and the couple of the upcoming guys that they have in the back end. You have Landon Collins, Cameron Curl, who I love in Washington. He's going to be a stud. Look out for him in IDP leagues. Last year, Washington football team was third against quarterbacks, according to Pro Football Reference. And I think that's going to stay the same. It's not a fluke. Ron Rivera's always had good defenses. Jack Del Rio's their defensive coordinator still. He's going to be there. They're going to do good. Justin Herbert is going to have a good season, but the game is in Washington, and I'm picking Washington to beat the Chargers, and I'm picking Justin Herbert to be right around the borderline of a QB1 this week.
Yeah, it's not a great, schedule draw for Herbert kicking off the season. That's one of the tougher defenses you can basically face this year. They were great last year, as you said. Do you think there's an option? Do you think of where Herbert was going in drafts, particularly in redraft? Do you think a lot of most teams, you got to ride with them, right? Because I would imagine the way you constructed your team, you draft Herbert so early, you're probably not carrying a high end, QB2, or maybe not even a QB2 at all in your roster, particularly in redraft. I know a lot of strategy is just if you got a stud there, don't even pick a backup, pick up one on the waiver wire in those 1 QB leagues. So you might be stuck with them, but you still think back end though. Maybe you have with quarterback one. You kind of have to. You have to play him.
You have to play him, but just temper your expectations is my main focus.
Probably not your DFS pick, too. I would say daily for
he won't be on my lineups
and the return you're probably going to get. What about you, Evan? You're looking at that Washington game. Are you got any? You probably a little scared of Herbert, or you got a little bit more confidence in him?
As far as week 1 goes, if you drafted Herbert, obviously, especially in redraft, you're playing Herbert most likely. But I think for week 1, I didn't draft much of Herbert. I don't have much of any stock in Herbert. I love him in Dynasty. But I think, it's possible we see a little regression in Herbert this year, to be quite honest. And then with the Eckler injury, I don't think that bodes well. Depending on how severe that is. So I think week 1 going up against that freaking just beast of a man, Chase Young. I'm gonna hold off on Herbert week 1.
Yeah, I was just thinking the Eckler being banged up. It sounds like he's probably going to play, but it's kind of, if he's less than 100%, if he's in there, that's not great.
Yeah, and then he runs the risk of tweaking it, So I almost wish he would sit out, because that is one guy I have a ton of stock in is Austin Eckler. So
a lot of people love Eckler. I mean,
yeah.
And he's one of those ones who loves fantasy too. He talented draft me. It's just those hamstring injuries, they just early in the year, they seem to just nab these guys. But yeah, I love Herbert too. I'm big into Herbert, and yeah, you got to play him, but I hope he does well. He's I like that team, sneaky team, kind of a dark horse playoff contender, especially if that defense comes around. So, yeah, and they did do some improvements on the offensive line. Keenan's healthy. Obviously they drafted on the offensive line there. So, yeah, that's a help. So,
Rashawn Slater is he's somebody I would have loved to see the Bengals pick up rather than Chase.
Right.
I know it was hard to pass up on that Burrow to Chase connection, what they did, in college. But man, in the NFL, man, that O-line is freaking you need it. It's just you have to have a good O-line. I mean, we saw what happened to the greatest quarterback in the league last year when their O-line was beat up in the Super Bowl. So that just shows you how important that position is.
Go well for Mahomes for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah, definitely. And when you compare Burrow and Herbert a lot, it's like, well, one team made an investment on the O-line. The other one last year had their O-line basically almost killed the guy and, destroyed his knee. So that wasn't great.
And I'm interested to see how Derwin James bounces back too.
Oh yeah, he's so fantastic and so key for that defense too. So that's a key. That defense can be really good. It's just a question of can they stay healthy.
A lot to watch in that game, but that's the most I'll be doing is just watching. I won't have too much going on as far as DFS or any of my fantasy lineups at least for week 1.
Right. That's a tough. Yeah, could be 2 good defenses there. I am up to my 9th. This is our 9th topic of the week. This one's just a guy I think's kind of a sneaky start this week. Nahim Heinz is timely too. He just got an extension too with the Colts. So that broke today that he's going to be there for a little bit longer, playing with Jonathan Taylor there in that backfield. He got agreed to a 3-year, $18.6 million extension with $12 million guaranteed. So they're paying him pretty good money. And he's going to be an interesting guy there to see how he fits into that offense. And I kind of like him this week because looking at Seattle's defense, they're not necessarily the greatest run defense in the world. They're kind of middle of the pack. They gave up the 5th most receptions to opposing running backs last year, gave up 92 receptions. And that's obviously the bread and butter of Nahim Heinz. And if that game script can go a certain way for him where Seattle's playing well and there's, kind of some scoring in that game, the Colts will obviously have to throw the ball as well. And that's where he might be able to get some more play. And there is opportunity for him to be kind of used more as a wide receiver because they have injuries there. T.Y. Hilton's hurt. They don't really have an established pass catcher on that team. Michael Pittman is a 2nd-year player who was up and down last year. Zach Pascal, Paris Campbell. I love me some Paris Campbell, but he's barely played any games in his NFL career. I hope this is the year, but you don't necessarily have a murderer's row of receivers on that team. So I think they're going to use kind of what you saw with Tony Pollard last night, but maybe even more than that, where they're going to have him on the field with Taylor. I could see that happening and using him more as a wide receiver, splitting him out wide and, running them both at the same time out of the slot and things like that, where he could get some opportunities in the passing game. So I actually think he's a pretty sneaky running back that you can use in your lineup, and running back gets real thin. Actually this week with some of these injuries, once you enter the 20s. So I actually kind of like Nahim Heinz, a guy who should get a decent return for you in fantasy, especially in PPR. What do you guys think about Nahim Heinz? Start with you, Mike.
Not a lot to add, except I think they're going to run, like you said, they're going to put them both in the backfield. To me, it's going to remind me a little bit of when the Saints would play Kamara and Latavius Murray at the same time.
I like it. What about you, Evan?
I love Heinz. in PPR leagues. He's one of the guys I target, with those later round picks, because he does have some upside. We saw, I think it was week 1 last year, where he just went off for a few touchdowns. So yeah, I mean, in PPR leagues, I'm all for Heinz. I think he's going to have that standalone value, even when Jonathan Taylor's on the field. But going back to Michael Pittman, he is one of my sleepers this year. I love me some Pittman. I think Wentz is going to do well, going back to his old coach. I think he's going to take a step forward. And like you said, Hilton's hurt, so I don't really have anyone else to throw to. And in my DFS lineup that I have with Sam Darnold, Christian McCaffrey, Travis Kelce, and the Robbie Anderson, I actually have Pittman at my flex. So I'm banking on Pittman this year. I take him in a lot of leagues as like my wide receiver 5, because I think he has a lot of upside. So yeah, I'm all for those kind of late round flyers of the Colts and Heinz and Pittman.
Yeah, Pittman's definitely breakout potential. He's probably the one I guess I'd trust the most. Campbell's a real dart throw, and Heinz just is going to be involved. I mean, he's one of their best skill players. When you go through those names, it's like, all right, who do you trust in that offense when you're talking about who the Colts should be trusting, and who Wentz, who historically is thrown to the running back, targets the tight ends a lot as well. I could see a lot of things going his way every game, and particularly this week. So that brings us to our 10th, and then for the 10th cheat, it's our cheat of the week. This is our segment of the week where we do kind of a lightning round style. We give you our last bits of information, a fun stat or something like that for our 10th cheat of the week. We're going to kick it off with you, Mike. What's your final topic for this evening?
All right, so we talked about this game earlier, but it's time to bring it up again. Baltimore has Gus Edwards down, J.K. Dobbins down, Justice Hill down, Marcus Peters down. Raiders are playing in a stadium they played in last year with no fans. This is the first year the fans are going to be there. It's going to be lit in Vegas, partly because it's just Vegas. But I think they're going to use all that momentum. Vegas is going to upset the Baltimore Ravens on Monday night.
I love it. Bold call, the Raiders. I mean, the Raiders are at home, though, so I guess maybe it's not that bold. I don't know. Are the Raiders good? I don't know. I never know how to gauge that team. They're so weird.
I just think it's going to be too much to handle for the Baltimore Ravens this close to the start of the season. And it's not going to be a blowout at all. It's going to be a close game, but they're going to slip one through.
It's week 1, man. Anything could happen.
I like it. One of those games is going to go that way. Why not that game? Especially at the end. If nothing weird's happened, then yeah, definitely maybe throw some money at the Raiders. Yeah. I like it. Let's go with you, Evan. What is your cheat of the week?
All right, man. So I spoke about it earlier. I do a lot of DFS writing. I also, do a lot of betting writing as well. So I also had a little fun with this one, being that our co-host here is a huge Chiefs fan. So the Browns, they showed last year they can stand toe to toe with the Chiefs. They only lost 22-17 in the AFC divisional round. So they showed they can stand toe to toe with them. Also, coming off a Super Bowl loss, teams coming off a Super Bowl loss have a trend going against them. So, with that being said, since 2000, Super Bowl teams coming off a loss are 5-16 against the spread in week 1 of the following season. So, the Browns are a well-rounded team, and I think it's going to be a shootout. Go ahead and give me the Browns with the 6 points. Sorry, Mike. The Chiefs may win, but the Browns will cover. Put your money on the Browns to cover against the Chiefs in week 1.
You got to take them outright, Evan. Just pick them. Pick the Browns. Bet that money line. Browns. What thoughts, Mike? Do you see it going that way, or Chiefs big?
No, it's not going to be Chiefs big. It's not. I am excited about the offensive line, but I am still worried about the run defense, and I absolutely love Nick Chubb. And
I think that's the key to that.
That's what I'm worried about. So yeah. Go ahead, Jay.
I think that run game is the key to them covering for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you think last year was what was it? Higgins, the fumble through the end zone. Like that was a big turning point in that game because they were going toe to toe. That play happened. It really kind of
thank you, Daniel Sorensen. Thank you, Daniel Sorensen.
Yeah, and Browns have a good D. Does that worry you at all, Mike? Just quick, the against the Chiefs offense, you worried about their fantasy output this week, or
I'm not really. I'm not really worried about their big fantasy outlook. The real one thing I will say, really, really quick, so we don't go too far into it, is the Chiefs really need to hurry up and find out who their WR2 is, because even as a Chiefs fan, I don't think it's Mecole Hardman.
No, yeah, I think he is what he is. So like Darius Fountain or something like that. I saw a lot of.
I think by the end of the year it's going to be Demarcus Robinson, but that doesn't mean he's fantasy relevant. That just means he's going to be the WR2.
Yeah, I mean Sammy Watkins wasn't super relevant too, but he was their wide receiver too. So I like it. I like the Browns Chiefs talk there. My cheat of the week to wrap things up here is I found a fun stat with just Titans versus wide receivers last year. 28 receivers had 10 or more points in PPR versus the Titans last year, which I think was the lead by far. You compare it to the Lions, which we already talked about being bad at defense. They had 24 games of 10 points or more. Falcons 26, Jets 22. So by far, you could play your receivers versus the Titans last year. So I love this game for fantasy points from the standpoint of Titans should be throwing on, pounding DeAndre Hopkins all day. He should be able to feast. And honestly, if that's the way the game goes and Kyler to Hopkins is working and they're scoring, then Titans are going to have to do the same. And that Arizona secondary isn't the same either. They lost Patrick Peterson. I think Jones and Brown have good games too there. So I think this one's a juicy matchup for fantasy. I think it could be a little bit of a shootout there. And I actually think you could kind of sneak in, if you're desperate in real deep leagues, you could maybe sneak in AJ Green. If he was going to have one more good game, I might bank on this one. I think he could get over. And honestly, picking him up and hyping him a little bit off season, I think they feed him a little bit. So that'll be an interesting to watch there. This is a game I'm starting most pieces if I can, especially in terms of the pass catchers in particular. And obviously, you're starting Henry on the Titans side, but I like this matchup. That Titans secondary couldn't stop anybody last year. So that wraps up all of our cheats for this week. We did our cheat of the week. We wrapped up our 10. That is it for week 1. So good stuff here. I'm pumped for football, pumped last night, and I'm excited for the games this weekend. Let's go quickly through our Twitter handles one more time. We'll start with you, Mike. Where can we find you?
You can find me on Twitter at DropTheMikeFF. See you guys next week.
And you, Evan, where can we find you?
Find me at Twitter at EV_RITT3, Ev_Rit3. And yeah, I mean, this was a hell of a time, guys. Can't wait to do it again next Friday. See everyone next Friday.
Yeah, and you can find me at JAYC_DFF. And thanks for joining us. I'm excited to bring the show to you each week going forward. For Mike, for Evan, I am Jay. We will see you next week. Later.